Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in today's live streaming. I apologize that I had to be 1 minute late for this live streaming for being in another interview. I see that some of you are catfighting in the comments and mocking for my microphone, so let me know if my voice is sounding clear in this regard. Today, I'm joined by Jack. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, my friend?
Close enough, Jake Morphonios.
Check Morphonios. Thank you very much, my friend, for being my guest. You're a chief investigator for the Blackstone Intelligence Network. Guys, his X account and also the YouTube are in the description below. I've seen some of his videos recently, and I was impressed by his historical knowledge is unmatched, in my opinion, and he understands the Middle East quite well. And also, he has covered the recent Palestinian conflict, so I wanted to host him to share some of the ideas and discuss it together. Thank you very much for being my guest again.
Thank you so much.
It's a really pleasure to have you. I was watching one of your videos and you mentioned that you have little girls, and I wanted to start this from a human perspective. You're a father of little girls before being a chief investigator or an expert. How do you describe the butchery of the kids in the Gaza Strip? How does it impact you personally when you see all this footage coming from the Gaza Strip? And you mentioned a few times that you are posting this footage on the Telegram for the people to see the severity and how horrible is the situation in the Gaza Strip.
Yes, I like a lot of people out there. I'm no stranger to graphic images. You can find it. Back when I was covering the um, the original invasion of Iraq back in 2003. There's a lot of footage back then that I've seen, and over the years, the 2008 massacre that took place in Gaza, 2014, hundreds upon hundreds of these horrible videos. But something was a little bit different this last week in reviewing some material. I saw one video in particular that really hit me hard in a way that no others have before, and I think it's because it made a stronger connection because I've got two little girls, 3-year-old twins, and the loves of my life. And this video that I saw was two young girls, probably about 5 years old, who were on the floor in a hospital because there were no beds. The doctors weren't able to give them any kind of painkillers because they're out of the medicines. Unlike so many other videos that show dead children, these little girls were alive still, but they were extremely, extremely maimed. One girl, whole side of her face was just burnt to a crisp, and she was laying there moaning. The other girl next to her, also covered in ash from the rubble, shin bone broken and sticking out of her leg as the doctor's moving it around. I'm sure both of these girls uh, passed away. There's nothing they could do for them in the conditions, but but they were alive and they were in intense suffering, and it filled me with such outrage that it's not just that they are killing these children, over 3,000 dead it just this month, but that they're also denying the hospitals, the rescue personnel, the medical workers the opportunity to treat the wounded and relieve suffering. That is a level of depravity by the Zionist regime that surpasses, I think, in scale of evil, even the bombings themselves. And it I went to bed that night. I woke up the next morning. October 30th was my birthday. I just turned 50 years old. And I woke up uh, to find my wife kind of shaking me awake because apparently I was screaming, having a nightmare, and was dreaming that that video was my daughters that had been killed, and that were suffering. And in the dream, I was in a hospital myself, and the thought, as I was coming to consciousness, the thought that I was alive and they were dead, I just felt such anger, and I guess it it shocks me, as it does, I'm sure, everybody watching, not just that Israel is doing this, but that there is so much apologetic uh, covering for these atrocities by people who ought to know better. People, especially, for example, the Christian right in the United States, these Christian Zionists who are cheering on this bloodshed. It is as far from the teachings of uh, Jesus as you could possibly get, and they
Yes.
embrace it, and it's just stunning to me.
I wanted to ask you about these right wingers, but first I want to just shed light on this, which was very, very interesting. You drew some parallels with history and what's happening now in Palestine, and you said, how can the people around, like, how can the people see what's happening now and not act, right? And in the question here would be, how can the people around the world watch what's happening and continue their lives? Don't they see what's happening? Don't they understand it? How could a civilized world allow this to happen? This was paraphrasing your questions that you raised in one of your recent videos. um, and you drew parallel with the 40s, what happened, and then 60, 70 years later we started to ask ourselves how on earth this was possible to happen 70, 80 years ago. And now we see that something similar is happening in front of our eyes. And some people are not only um, are not only careless about it, but they are justifying it.
Hmm.
They're calling for more and more and more. And the other day, I saw a phenomenon on X. I was also wondering this question that in the 40s, how was it like if I lived during the 40s in Germany? Was I going to, for example, point my finger to a Jewish person
Hmm.
and tell the police that I have a Jewish neighbor? And I was like, how was that possible back then? And then I see today on X, people from Germany or live in Germany. I don't know if they are Germans or not, and they are tagging the police. They're tagging the what they call the Verfassungsschutz, the Office for the Protection of the Constitution, on Twitter, under videos, under tweets of people telling them, "Look, what does this person say on social media platforms?" It's like the history is repeating itself.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And I majored in history in college, and my focus, my concentration, uh, was was in the American Revolution and in World War II. And we had a lot of conversations about, how did the fascists rise to power? How could the people see this and not speak up and stop it? And after they did come to power, how is it that the people didn't stand up and stop it? And everybody in my classes and people I've talked to over the years, everyone takes the position that, oh, had I been alive back then, I know what I would have done. I would have stood against the Nazis. Even if they killed me, I wouldn't have gone along with this. But I bring their attention these days to their utter silence on what Israel is doing. And my position is that anybody who thinks they would have stood against the Nazis and what they did to the Jews back in the 30s and 40s, if they are not out there speaking out boldly and loudly and putting their personal reputations at risk to take a stand against what Israel is doing today to the Palestinians, those are not the kind of people who would have had the kind of moral compass or courage back during World War II to have stood against the Nazis either. So you can't say I would have stood against the Nazis, but I'm okay with the genocide taking place today. So really, I think you can gauge people's cowardice, how they would have been, whether they would have spoken up or been silent in the past based on how they're behaving today. And unfortunately, the world is full of cowards.
Actually, there is also intimidation against the people, right? There are so many people I know here in Germany. They know what's happening. They know that there is acts of genocide now happening against the Palestinians of Gaza. And despite that, yeah, it's partly cowardice, I would say, but also people will lose their livelihoods. It's not
Absolutely.
easy. It's not easy to be sent to financial or economic jail.
Hmm.
This is an example that I like to repeat. In our countries, for example, in the Middle East, we are less smart dictatorships. It's like if somebody challenges the system or crosses the lines, they throw this person in jail, and he rots in this jail, and everybody knows about the case, and it turns into public opinion, and they say it's a dictatorship. Look, this person has been imprisoned, but there are prisons here as well,
Yeah.
and these prisons are invisible, and you will be isolated from the society. You will lose scholarships, you will lose your jobs. Only last week, a friend and a colleague on Twitter and X, she contacted me, and she lost her job now
Mm.
because she said quote free Palestine on her Twitter account, and she was asking how can I help her with the crowdfunding because she lost her job now.
Hmm.
And so many people are scared of that, right, to lose the
Yeah.
job. They are
Yeah.
not independent, they are dependent. And this
Right.
is the system is built in a way, economic system is built in a way that the vast majority of the people are dependent on the factories, on the companies, on the government in order to survive. So
Yeah.
your bread is in the hands of someone else. So if you speak, you lose that. This is a smarter
Yeah.
system, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. And I can speak from personal experience. I've been doing reporting on YouTube since 2012. And I was doing things in writing before then, but for years I could say what I wanted on YouTube. And in regards to geopolitics, what was going on in Israel, so on and so forth. But back in 2014, what was happening in Ukraine. But over time, around 2019, things really started to crack down. I was doing well with my YouTube channel. I used to be a financial crimes investigator for a Fortune 100 corporation. Now, uh, I had transitioned though into doing this full time, research reporting, and was supporting my family with it up until I became overly critical of what Israel was doing to the Palestinians. And as the ADL, the SPLC were given more and more control over censorship of content on YouTube and um, Twitter and so forth, they started cracking down. I started getting the strikes. My channel, I survived partly because the Wall Street Journal did a piece on it, covered it. The USA Today did, because they originally shut my channel down, but I managed to get it back because there was enough media exposure. But they demonetized me, and I have made I went from making, I won't say how much, but enough to support my family, to making absolutely nothing. Everything was cut off from YouTube and from other sources. And then I was making it just based on donations from viewers, but then they shadow banned my accounts to where even people subscribed to my channel were, hardly ever saw anything. So the income dried up, and that's just the truth of it. They go after you financially, even if they don't completely silence your voice. What they do is they take away your ability to reach an audience, and they take away the financial incentive to put this much time. I'm sure you're the same with the amount of time that you put in to doing this. You can't maintain that and some other full-time job at the same time. There's just not enough
Yes.
hours in the day. So they steal from you. There's something about Zionism where stealing from people is really their modus operandi.
Are you on Rumble or you're just posting on YouTube?
I've been on YouTube, but I've recently started a Rumble channel, rumble.com. It's Blackstone Intel.
Mhm.
All of my extensions on most of my social media accounts is Blackstone Intel. So
Guys,
yeah.
please give him a follow on Rumble as well. My Rumble is in the description below. I'm broadcasting both on YouTube and on Rumble at the same
Excellent.
time. Last week, for the first time, YouTube deleted one of my videos,
Mhm.
claiming that I violated the their law of on violent organizations. And it was very ironic because before I started the live, I said I do not endorse Hamas, I do not endorse violence, I do not endorse killing innocent civilians, and I believe that if Hamas captures an Israeli civilian, they should be unharmed, they should be released, and those who are soldiers, they should be treated as prisoners of war. And
Mhm.
I said, before I played a very short video that Hamas released about these hostages, I said, this is a propaganda video, guys. Take it as a propaganda because all sides engage in a propaganda. This is used to put pressure on Netanyahu. And despite all this context, they deleted the video. So, and I remember when I first started my YouTube in 2017, I used to get more views when I had 1,000 subscriber
Mhm.
than I do now when I have 52,000
Yeah.
subscriber. And
Yeah.
it's like, go make it make sense, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's why I think Rumble is probably is a better option. I'm here until they delete me, but I'm broadcasting on both sides. But since you mentioned these Christian Zionists
Mhm.
in the United States, I wanted to focus on the right wingers. I want to be very honest with you. During the corona times, in during Ukraine and everything that happened in the past years, I was fooled to believe that probably the new anti-war movement is coming from the conservative side or from the right-wing
Mm.
side. Those who were pretending to be anti-war, not to send weaponry to Ukraine, America first, Europe first, Germany first. Why would we spend all this money? Why do we create refugee crisis? Why do we want to receive all these refugees instead of encouraging our people to multiply, right? And I
Yeah.
found that, okay, it sounds if I'm European, I would probably think the same way, right?
Yeah.
But then the Israeli onslaught started against the Gaza Strip, and all of a sudden it's like it flipped. And I'm like, the same exact people, without naming now these personalities, but everybody knows them, all of a sudden they became like a neocon
Hmm.
war hawks. And what happened here? On what ground do the Christian Zionists and these right wingers stand on to justify selling this war to their audience?
Well, you've got part of it. Uh, I'll just say first thing. Part of it is on both sides, Republicans and Democrats alike. None of them are anti-war. It's just anti-war for certain wars and not others. The Democrats are more and more coming out against what's happening now in Gaza, but they're the flag wavers for the slaughter going on in Ukraine.
Yes.
Uh, Conversely, you've got the Republicans who have been kind of against a lot of the warfare in Ukraine are now taking the position that they absolutely have to support Israel. Now, as far as so they're all hypocrites. As far as the Christian Zionists, part of it is a skewed misunderstanding of what the scriptures say. They won't say this outright, but I know this to be the case because years ago, I used to be a Southern Baptist and attended in the evangelical church, and I know what was taught, and I know what the common people believe. And the evangelical faction of Protestantism is looking forward to the return of Jesus in the second coming.
Hmm.
They believe that Jesus will come, according to the book of Revelation. Jesus returns to the earth at a time when the world has gathered its forces to attack Israel, and the Jews are on the verge of utter annihilation. Only at that point, when they're about to be completely eradicated from the earth, does the Messiah return and save them and usher in the 1,000-year millennium period of peace, in which Christians are going to hang out with, Jesus, and the lion lays down with the lamb, and everything's wonderful. But to get there must be just an apocalyptic level of violence against Israel. What they don't say when they're supporting Israel with what Israel's doing is that they know, according to their own scriptures, how this ends up is masses, 95% of Jewry will be destroyed. It's actually probably the most anti-Semitic philosophy you could possibly have. It's very similar to some of uh, the Salafists, the Takfiri idea that you have to create enough carnage and chaos for the Messiah to
Hmm.
come and intervene in the midst of that. And so we're going to make it happen. So a lot of the evangelicals believe that by supporting God's chosen people, uh, and that this will usher in the time when Jesus will return to the earth. Um, because the more chaos there is, the more warfare there is, the greater we get to the quicker we get to that period of utter chaos when Jesus has to return. So it's a really skewed, bizarre way of looking at it, and I think that a lot of them don't even process this and think through. Wait a second, I'm supporting the idea of mass slaughter of a large number of people in order to get to a period of peace and joy with the Messiah.
Hmm.
And so it's really screwed up. It's a really messed up way of seeing things.
To be honest, because I come from a Christian family, and when I was a kid, I have read probably every single book that my mom had about Christianity, and I do not recall at all that this scenario that probably should happen in order
Mhm.
for Jesus to come for the second time. I don't remember
Yeah.
my mother mentioned to me. I don't remember that I have read it anywhere in the books that I have
Mhm.
read in the past. And I was truly astonished that enough people in the United States believe, and those are not ordinary people, those are talking heads on TVs preaching
Mhm.
this ideology on YouTube, and
Mhm.
they are preparing the people for an Armageddon,
Mhm.
and they're calling for murder, genocide live on
Yeah.
live stream, and those people are not censored. Their the YouTube channel are not taken
Mhm.
down. It's
Yeah.
like I do not understand this at all. Like people like yourself, the content is suppressed, but someone like I always forget his name. Now the friend of Jordan Peterson, he has his own program now.
Mm.
He was saying that enough Israel must kill enough son of the like in Palestine, and after the 7th of October he was literally calling for murdering Palestinians, and the
Yeah.
video is there. Video is monetized, and nothing has happened to that
Right.
video. That's a big question mark. But yesterday I saw this video. I want to share it with you. I was watching this yesterday on X. This is Congressman Brian Mast, and he says, "I think when we look at this as a whole, I would encourage the other side to not lightly throw around the idea of innocent Palestinian civilians. I don't think we would so lightly throw around the term innocent Nazi civilians." I want to just show you this 20-second of video, and I will ask about your comment.
As a whole, I would encourage the other side to not so lightly throw around the idea of innocent Palestinian civilians, as is frequently said. I don't think we would so lightly throw around the term innocent Nazi civilians during World War II.
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you the first thing. I had not seen that. Uh, but I'll tell you the first thing I'm going to do is when I have my next live stream is I'm going to be mobilizing my audience to send some messages to
Mhm.
the gentleman in response. He needs to be called out for that. That's insane. Uh, but you can tell he's a Zionist. This is the Zionist philosophy. They don't see the Palestinians as equals. Um, and unfortunately, it extends to the Christian right. And I don't know if he is, but that's the general sentiment. Is you see the Palestinians all as terrorists, and well, even if they're not the ones shooting off the rockets, their very presence enables uh, Hamas to do it. Is the argument, and it's reprehensible. There's no way to justify that kind of uh, excusing the mass slaughter of unarmed combatants. It makes no sense.
From my side, I when I see such videos and read the statements, I feel like there is illness, mental illness, in this. It's like the other day when I wrote on Twitter on X, it's like there is a contest who is
Yeah.
more psychopath and who is more bloodthirsty. Like it's like somebody is trying to prove himself more of a monster than his colleagues, so that he
Mhm.
gets more votes or more a bigger platform, or what. It's like I do not see for example, leaders in other countries or politicians are competing with each other to prove
Yeah.
who wants to see more blood is shed in other countries. It's like
Yeah.
it's like an exclusive. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are other countries, but from what I'm seeing, it feels like it's an exclusive thing to this so-called ruling elite in the United States.
It's very they're it's extremely cynical. The truth is most of these people saying this, most of these politicians, they don't actually believe this stuff that they say. But there's a perception that America is so pro-Israel, especially if you're competing, if you're a Republican competing in an area where you're trying to court the Christian right vote, you
Yeah.
have to say what it takes to get their votes. And you're exactly right. It's no exaggeration to say that it's a competition to see who can one up the other in how far they go with their support for Israel. And we saw that with the brand new Speaker of the House. The very first thing he did was talk about how, Mike Johnson, about how we're going to send more money to Israel, more weapons to Israel. It makes no sense. Here we are in the United States suffering from inflation, everybody struggling to pay their bills, and yet we're going to send however many billions more to Israel, which runs a budget surplus each year. We're going to send them money that they don't need to kill more people.
From
It
people's pockets. That's the
right.
thing. From the
Yeah.
people's pockets. The inflation is a taxation at the end.
Yeah.
They are printing the money, and they are taking the money back from the people's pockets. The same thing is happening here in Germany. I'm not a German. I live here. I pay my taxes here, but my taxes are going to Ukraine, and
Hmm.
now I have to pay exactly 100% more for my heating and for my electricity, and my rent is it has increased 3 times in the past 2 years after the Ukraine war.
Yeah.
The groceries, like, sorry for this small details, but every 2 3 days we used to spend 50 euros for groceries, and now 100 euros for groceries every 3 days. It's crazy. Where is
Hmm.
this money going to, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like a robbery of the people, and recycling it and then sending it to the war zone. And the people do not want that.
Hmm.
If you want to send money and weaponry to Ukraine or to Israel, do a referendum
Right.
and ask the people if they want to do it. And if the people, those who want to send the money, maybe we
Exactly.
should tax them, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And
um,
a lot of the wealthiest class that managed to use loopholes, financial loopholes, to get out of paying anything in federal income tax, they're not the ones that are being taxed. The investor class, at least in the United States, the type of income that they receive through stock investments and so forth don't get taxed in the same way. There you can write off, real estate depreciation, all kinds of things to get out of having to pay taxes. Donald Trump, who says he's a billionaire, went for years not paying a single dime in federal income tax. It's the middle class, our lower economic class in the United States doesn't pay federal income tax either. Uh, so it's the middle class, and so we have this shrinking of the middle class to where uh, it's the middle class that's getting hit the hardest. While what it does is it just moves the middle class down into the poverty and moves that up. So eventually it has to come to an end. But in the
yeah,
meantime, Israel's getting fat off of it. They receive billions of dollars a year, not only in weapons from the United States, but Israel also receives a lot of money that's printed or created by the U.S. Federal Reserve, which Israel then reinvests some of it back in. And they not only get the money that we give, but they get interest off of money that they're investing um, back into corporations that the Federal Reserve is funding and so forth. So they double dip, they get a lot of money. And so
yeah.
the idea that Israel needs our money is just preposterous. They don't need it. They're doing quite well.
Speaking of the taxation, I also have a Patreon account, and Patreon pays from my income 19% to the financial office here, like directly it goes them.
Mm,
And then at the end of the year, when you do your tax declaration, and the tax office here, they do not accept that only 19% from them. They say we have nothing to do with that. That's coming from
mm.
Patreon. You have to pay again 19% over that. So 38%
Jeez.
from from what you get from Patreon is going to as taxes, and then you're paying 19% for everything you buy from
Mm,
your groceries and from your
mhm.
anything you buy, plus the inflation. So it feels like almost 60% of your money is going without even without even having the money in your hands.
Mhm.
This is very crazy what's happening now in here as well. I'm really trying to find solutions for that, but
Yeah.
it's very difficult if you don't have enough money to have an advisor, let's say
Mhm.
tax advisors, those who can help you to evade this
Right.
stuff. Like Donald Trump, he knows how
Yeah.
to not pay his taxes, right?
Right.
And speaking of, because you mentioned Israel today, I was checking Haaretz, and Haaretz usually is critical of Israeli government, but this opinion article they published it, they say Israel is not committing genocide in Gaza.
Mm.
If the massive death toll in both Israel and the Gaza Strip was not horrendous enough, the false claim continues to be spread that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza in retribution for the massacres carried out by Hamas on October the 7th. Among them are anti Semites who believe Jews are ultimate evil in the world, conspiracists, quote unquote influencers who, in addition to caring about the Palestinians, have their eye on their social media cloud, pro Palestinian activists who support the Palestinians' right to quote armed resistance, and who are trying to bridge the unbridgeable gap between their supposed concern for human rights and the atrocities committed by Hamas by shifting the focus to the bigger atrocity of genocide. There is a very high bar set for defining genocide laid out in international conventions and laws. This state that it is not enough to count the dead, but one must also prove, quote, intend to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Now, after reading just few of these paragraphs of this opinion article, do you think that there is the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group in Palestine? Is there any indication for that? Is there any statement that proves that, or actions underground that, because according to him, the death toll alone is not enough indicator that there is a genocide happening. Even if 100,000 people dies now in the
Mhm.
Gaza Strip, that doesn't mean it's a genocide. There should be the intent.
In at least in American law, there is you have to prove that either a party committed a crime, intended to commit a crime, or had sufficient knowledge that what they were doing could or would end up being a crime. So the argument that, oh, I didn't intend to. Yeah, I dropped a bomb on a home full of civilians, but how could I have known there were civilians there? It just doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up in the laws of any civilized country. It certainly is contrary to international law, which says that that's not a defense. If there is reasonable cause to believe that civilians could be harmed, and you do something anyway, then you're still guilty. You just can't use that defense. Genocide isn't. If you look it up, I just pulled it up on the Oxford Dictionary. It says the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. That by itself, that's the definition of genocide. And anybody who is rational is going to see that that's what Israel is doing. You just look at the number. For example, I think you played recently the um, video of Wolf Blitzer from CNN interviewing the IDF,
Yes.
um, and he kept pushing back. It's one of the few times I've ever seen, mainstream media push back against Israeli propaganda. But he kept saying it. How could you do this if you knew that there would be so much collateral damage? You knew that there were so many civilians there, and you did it to go after one person. Now, I saw someone make an argument. Now, and of course, the IDF was saying, well, this is war. You can't avoid that. Fine. Yeah, we had to go after one Hamas commander. And unfortunately, that results in hundreds of dead. But I saw someone pose this question on social media. They said, what if the Hamas commander was nestled amidst an Israeli school with hundreds of Jewish children?
Yesterday, my wife sent me this video.
Oh, was it in a video?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. It really makes you think. Wait a second. Would Israel really drop a bomb to kill one Palestinian fighter would they drop a bomb knowing that it's going to kill hundreds of Jewish children? Of course not. They would never make that argument. And if the other side ever made that argument that, hey, there was an Israeli soldier who went in and into a school, so we thought bombing the school or bombing the Jewish neighborhood and killing, hundreds and hundreds of Jewish civilians, that's acceptable. There would be such an outcry, such public outrage over that. The chanting of anti-Semitism would fill the airwaves to where you wouldn't hear anything but that. But in reverse, hey, let's go with that argument because they're Palestinians. If they're Palestinians, they're fair game. It's a complete double standard.
I just want to make a personal comment here because I'm receiving some comments, and 99% of the time the comments are positive, but there are some people who make comments like this: you barely have a job, you admit it yourself, can work. And then he says, you aren't going to cut it in YouTube, so I'm sure you get welfare from the German government. I do not receive any penny from the German government. I'm not on welfare. I have my job here on YouTube. I also have another part-time job. So I'm running between two jobs, guys, so that I survive and I provide for my family and help my family also who are stuck in a war zone in Aleppo. So thank you very much for such a comment, but I don't get any penny from the German government. Not a single one. I pay to the German government every year thousands of euros from my below middle class income. So anyways, thank you for your comment. You're just adding some more traffic to my channel. In one of your videos, recent videos, you said Israel never held into account they have got the words bodyguard. However, some of the commentators they say that it's Israel who is in control of the United States. In your opinion, who is more in control of the other? Is it the Israelis they have more influence over the American politics, or the Americans are consciously, the American administration consciously wants to play this bodyguard role for the Israelis?
Well, it's both. You have to understand the U.S. government is not a single philosophy. You've got competing factions within the U.S. government and behind the U.S. government. Really, the true power of the United States is not our politicians. It's not our political class. It's I hate to use the phrase deep state because it's just so, it conjures up conspiracy theorists and things like that. But we really do have an entrenched bureaucracy in the United States that does not care who's in power, Republicans or Democrats, that's there. The true power in the USA are these think tanks like the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations grew out of the old Rothschild roundtable groups. The Council on Foreign Relations decides what they want for their investor class in the USA, and they will write up policies, foreign policies, and give it to our U.S. State Department. The State Department then makes it our official government policy. So it could be something like, it'd be good to go into Syria and take the oil, right? It becomes U.S. policy. They won't say we're going to go take the oil, but certain things. Syria has to do this. This has to happen. When Syria does not conform, then we send in the CIA to soften things up. And if they can't blackmail them, if they can't use compromise of some sort, if they can't use death threats to get what they want, then you start backing the proxy militias to create chaos. And ultimately, in the very end, what you do is you bring in the U.S. military if all else fails. In Israel, it's much the same way. You've got this investor class that is using Israel as an outpost. They're using the United States State Department and the U.S. Federal Reserve to accomplish a lot. The CIA is kind of a little paramilitary to go back and forth and create trouble wherever they go. Israel uses the United States because of the extent that they have influence because of financial power. For example, right now we've got Nikki Haley is kind of neck and neck with DeSantis as second in line, one of the most rabid pro-Israel Zionists to ever walk the sands of the United States.
Not the smartest one.
Yeah, and she
Not
just
the smartest one.
Not bright at all. She is not an intelligent woman, but she knows Israel, 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 Israel. And she just had a meeting with the Adelsons.
Yes.
Well, I guess it's just Miriam now, but they're the ones who funded the rise of Donald Trump. They're the kingmakers, the Adelsons, and what was required of Trump in order to get all of the funding that he did back in 2016 was absolute commitment to Zionist operations in Israel. Trump was going to have to support the claim that Jerusalem is the united capital of Israel. He was going to have to support settlement building, have to support annexation of the West Bank, and so on. So you've got these. Some of these people are dual citizens, Israeli American, and so from the Israel side, you've got a lot of influence over U.S. politics. But you also have a larger bureaucracy in the United States that's seeking to expand the empire. So both sides are accomplishing purposes using each other.
Hmm.
Uh, but ultimately, it's not, in my opinion, it's not the United States and it's not Israel. It is this class of people who are so wealthy, so powerful. They are behind the scenes pulling the strings of both sides to get what benefits them the most. Um, and they just happen to be using the United States and Israel to do that.
Hmm. So it's like more complementing each other in the roles and the duties and the mutual interest between them. Speaking of Israel and the right of Israel to defend itself, this is coming from from the Russian ambassador to the UN. He says he affirmed that Israel is an occupying state and has no right to defend itself, calling for an end to the bloodshed to avoid expanding the scope of the crisis to the entire region. On the other side, the Americans and, of course, the collective West, they say Israel has an absolute right to defend itself. How do we draw the line here? Where does Israel have? In what situation Israel has the right to defend itself? In what situation doesn't have to defend itself? What's the timeline like? Because we just speak about like Israel has the right to defend itself. There's no timeline. There is no context. There is no geographical lines
Mhm.
drawn here. How can we contextualize this? What is your position on this?
My position is this: the Israel is uh, Israel is an established state. They've been around for since 1948. They're not going anywhere. There's no way to cleanse the area of Jews. That would be ethnic cleansing, genocide. They're not going to voluntarily leave. So it's a fact of reality. Israel is there, and they're going to continue to exist as a political state, contrary to what Hamas or some other groups may want. I think that it was a reasonable position that Arafat took to say, look, if we get statehood, if we're moving toward that, then we can acknowledge Israel's right to exist. But there is a difference between coexistence and one having its boot on the throat of the other, and so claims of self-defense don't apply in the situation where there is fighting back against oppression. The caveat is what I can't support is attacks on civilians from one side or the other. I cannot, in good conscience, say, "Oh, I object to Israel killing Palestinian civilians," but Jewish civilians are fair game. There should be no killing of
Yes.
civilians on either side. So Israel has a right to defend its people against civilian attacks. I don't believe in the right of Israel to do what it's doing if Hamas, for example, were to be attacking the military occupation, attacking the IDF itself or the infrastructure, something like that. That's more, in my personal opinion, fair game because they're living under military occupation. Um, so Israel cannot claim that it is an act of self-defense when it reacts with such disproportionate carnage against the civilian population. That is not self-defense. There is no way to see it as self-defense. There's no human rights organization in the world that can justify it as self-defense. Very few governments other than the United States and maybe a couple Western countries will say that it's self-defense. This
Mm.
simply is unacceptable. So
But
that's my thought.
don't you think after this 7th of October, with the amount of bloodshed that happened on both sides, there is a very deep problem here, right? And that is, people in Palestine believe that they cannot coexist with the Zionist state. And
Mhm,
there are Jewish people in Syria, Jewish people in Iraq, Jewish people in Iran. I mean, Jewish people are integral part of the of. I would love to see the Syrian Jewish people returning and coming back to
mhm,
Syria. And there were state-sponsored, apparently, visits for the Jewish people who left to Manhattan and then they came back to visit Syria. They were encouraging them to come back. I think that's a richness of the
mhm.
society, to have the Jewish people come back, or at least to have a foothold, right,
Right.
in their countries that they left a
Yeah.
few decades ago. But the idea that there should be a state only for the Jewish people,
Mhm.
it gives the impression also that other countries, they can also have a state only for Muslim people.
Right.
It will give, like, when it's an ethnocentric religious country, then it gives a justification for radical groups in Syria or in the
Mhm.
region to try to establish their Islamic State,
Right.
Druze state, Kurdish state, and all these small sub-states, right, sub-nations.
Well,
So what do you
absolutely.
think?
Yeah.
What do you think about the one state, like one state, the Jewish people, Christians, and the Muslims living all under one constitution that treats everyone with respect and equal rights?
Well, for years, I supported the idea of a one-state solution over the two-state solution. Uh, I'm more open either way at this point, but the if you have a two states, and one is a Jewish state, you're right. You're going to have conflict between the two sides. There's What good is it if the Palestinians get a state of their own, buttressed up against Israel, if Israel continues to be militant and is constantly at war and killing the civilians there? Because it's not like the Palestinians would suddenly have a military that could, um, take on the IDF with the United States backing behind the IDF. So a one-state solution would have uh, equality for all people. But the reason that I think that it's I like it in principle far more than I like the two-state solution. However, the reality is there are so many uh, Palestinians in the diaspora as well, out as refugees. If they have the right of return, there it's it swamps the area, and Jews become the minority, and they're
Mm,
just not going to. I mean, it would be in reverse, kind of what happened in 1948. The Arabs were the overwhelming majority, and here comes this little minority coming and saying we're gonna rule the whole area, we're gonna dominate, we're gonna do this. So the Jews are not going to turn around and say, oh well, let's have a one state solution with equal right to vote, equal representation between all people, because then they're going to be relegated to a minority status. And and so I just don't. I like the idea of equality. I just don't see it ever happening.
mhm,
The two state, I think, is more realistic, but not in the way that Israel is proposing. Says, okay, in principle, Palestinians have a state of their own, but they can't have a standing army, and they it's a non-starter. Of course the Palestinians have to be able to have a military to defend themselves. At the very least, the bare minimum is all of these settlements that have been built since 1967 have to be turned over to the Palestinians. um, you have to pull the Israelis back to the territories. I would say go back to uh, what was originally proposed maybe in the partition 1948 by the United Nations, let them settle
uh,
in that area.
yeah.
But Definitely they can't take what they're squatting on now. It's
Yeah.
illegally occupied land. You have to give that land back, and there's precedence for it. They, in 2006, the Israelis pulled out of Gaza, pulled out their settlements from Gaza. So it's not like it can't be done. You just have to have the will to do it. If you have the two-state solution, but the settlements are still there, you're just going to have the ongoing conflict.
Yeah.
It's never going to
That's
end.
that's the line of the 4th of June 1967. So they have to withdraw to that line, and
Absolutely.
that means in line with international law. Before I ask you the last question, I just want to share a perspective from the region. This is not my opinion. This is not my analysis. I'm just bringing a perspective from the region, from the Middle East, where probably people, strategists there, they see that Israel's dependence now on insecurity and armament on the United States is not in favor of Israel itself. And the diminishing power of the United States is an indicator that Israel is also becoming more desperate in the region. And it's using excessive force, for example, in the Gaza Strip, in a projection of power that despite the diminishing power of the United States, it's still a strong power in the region. And people argue in the region that if the balance of power changes and the United States stops being, for example, the absolute hegemon, Israel will not be able to continue its current attitude as also hegemon power in Palestine. So they say we have to be patient and we have to support every action that can weaken the American empire in order for in the medium run that we can see that Israel will also diminish in its power and accept the one-state solution for the Jews and the Palestinians and the Arabs to live together. This is just a
Yeah,
perspective from the
yeah,
region. I'm not like endorsing it, just bringing for the
sure.
people also to understand. The last question would be, what's the red line, in your opinion, for the opponents of Israel? And if you cross this red line, then there's going to be a regional war, which means the intervention of Hezbollah, probably Iran, probably Syria. Yemen is already firing Scud missiles
Yeah.
on Israel now.
My red line, they've already passed. They crossed it. They crossed it as soon as they started massacring the Gazans. So the red line uh, has passed. The problem is that the fallout, the ramifications of all of this is significant. You've got you've you've got, for example, Hezbollah, and tomorrow we'll see what what Hassan Nasrallah says. I'm
Mhm.
very much looking forward to what he's going to say, see if it's going to indicate the direction they're going to go. It appears that Iran has been keeping the brakes on Hezbollah uh, to keep it from spiraling, even though there's been some of these pot shots they've been taking across the border. There's not been the dramatic response that a lot of us would have expected to see. Part of the problem is that uh, right now Iran has got two major fronts. They're using Hezbollah to help keep Bashar al-Assad propped up there in Syria, because if Hezbollah pulls out, if there's another round, if the CIA gets in there, starts agitating again with the Free Syrian Army or whoever, and things really get going again, so you need Hezbollah to help keep things stable there in Syria. You also have got Hezbollah in Lebanon, kind of keeping this this, I don't want to say peace, but a standstill uh, between them and the Christians and so forth. If you have Hezbollah open up another front, now you're going to probably have Israeli attacks in reprisal on Beirut. You're going to have Lebanon, which is already teetering economically. They're going to get into a big mess there. Hezbollah is going to be entrenched in this fight with the IDF, even though Hezbollah is extremely powerful and could probably beat Israel in a head-to-head match with no other parties joining in. The fact is, even at the end of it, Hezbollah would be severely degraded. they would suffer a lot of casualties, which they're willing to do. And ultimately, even if they beat Israel, the problem is that you've now got a weakened Hezbollah. Lebanon is going to become chaos. You're going to have other factions there in Lebanon trying to supplant the Shia control, Shia dominance. And then you're potentially going to have trouble in Syria flaring up again. That would be if I was running the show, if I was the CIA, that's what I would do, is take advantage of the distraction there and get things going again. So Iran, I think, is wary of things going bad. They don't clearly Hezbollah is the greatest asset that Iran is connected with. Of the 15 proxies that they help to supply support to. So to lose Hezbollah, or at least to have it degraded down to where it's going to take years to build it back up, that would be a problem. So as far as a red line, I think that they, for all the talk, are not going to. I think that all the parties are going to try and keep this from getting worse. And I'm afraid, as pessimistic as this sounds, I watched closely in 2008. I watched closely in 2014, and I kept thinking, this is it. This is it. Hezbollah, Iran, they're finally going to jump in and come. This is finally a red line that's been crossed, and now Israel's going to pay the price. And they didn't. Nobody really got in there and did much. There was a little bit, but nothing significant. And I'm afraid that that's going to be the status quo this time as well, unless Israel ramps up what it's doing. I think that Israel knows, at least based on its pattern in the past, Israel will commit incredible atrocities, but it knows it has a little time period in which it can get away with it before the world mobilizes, before the resolve of the allies of the Palestinians finally say, this is it, we're going to get in. And I think that they're going to milk this as long as they can, but at the point where they think, okay, Hezbollah is now going to get, really turn up the volume, I think Israel's going to back off and kind of pull out of Gaza again. I don't think that Israel's going to keep a, like a year-long campaign going. I think that we're looking at a period of weeks to months before it starts to settle down. And that's why they're bombing as hard as they can now and wiping out the infrastructure as fast as they can, because they know they've got a time limit. Because eventually, even with all of those concerns that I mentioned that Iran and Hezbollah has, the patience will wear out, and they will get involved in dramatically escalating the conflict. And so you've got the USA and other parties working to try and keep things from getting worse. And the thing that drives me crazy about all this is that the ones that are being sacrificed are the Palestinian civilians, primarily in Gaza. They're the ones paying the price. And so I would love to see that all of these parties that have been talking so boldly for so many years about standing up for the Palestinians, I want to see action. I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in war. I don't like it, but I do believe in self-defense, and I do believe coming to the aid of innocent people that are being slaughtered. And if that results in more casualties in the process, people have to take a stand for what's right. You cannot let an aggressor like Israel get away with this over and over again, because if they get away with it again this time, the way they did in 2008 and 14, and what they did in southern Lebanon back in 82, if they get away with it, it guarantees they're going to do it yet again. So just go all in now and do something. And there's different
I
ways
think
of doing it.
Yeah, I think there are two scenarios where Hezbollah could intervene. I mean, they are already intervened in this. They're playing their part in the south now. But I think if Israel continues in this campaign, like without a time frame, as you mentioned, because I agree with you that there is a time limit for Israel to commit these crimes in the Gaza Strip. If Israel receives an extension for this time limit, and to continue the pushing the Palestinians to the south, and which means we allocate them to Sinai. That's the red line that was already established by Hezbollah and Iran and Syria. The second one is a so-called preemptive attacks on Hezbollah or on Iran, which I don't think it will happen from the Israeli side. But so the first one, and that is the determination of the Netanyahu government to continue what they're doing with an extension time frame and seriously trying to push the Palestinians to the Sinai. That would be the more plausible scenario where when the Hezbollah side will intervene. Tomorrow, Nasrallah will speak. I will follow his speech. I will write notes, guys, in English, and I will do live streaming at 5 p.m. Central European time. I will also host a colleague from Beirut to analyze the speech. In my opinion, people are exaggerating and hyping about it. It's like, oh, tomorrow is going to declare war. No, wars do not. People do not declare war in a televised speech like this. And that's not how Hezbollah operates. If you know anything about Hezbollah, he's going to set the rules of engagement tomorrow with Israel. This is our rules of engagement. This is how we increase the pace of the hostilities with Israel, and this is our red line, and this is our time frame. There's going to be the rules will be established tomorrow in a speech so that the people in the region know what to expect, because so many people are saying, okay, Hezbollah didn't intervene, they betrayed the Palestinian people, and the other people were like, yalla, let's go. It's like it's a picnic, you know. That's not how wars start. So we will see tomorrow what's going to happen. But up until then, I want to thank you so much for your time and for dedicating your valuable time for me and for the audience of Syriana Analysis. Guys, his Twitter X is in the description below. His YouTube is again in the description below. Please give him a follow. He's really doing a great job. I'm trying to watch regularly. It's a very long content. I'm also having a limited time to prepare my stuff and also my other part-time job. So it's like, you know, the price you pay when you are independent journalist. But you're an inspiration. I really like your work. Thank you very much for everything you do.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
It's a really pleasure. And guys, if you like this video, share it. It's free with your friends. And if you want to give some support to my independent work, you can see the link here on the screen. On Patreon, www.patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. It's a great help from you. Thank you so much. And we will see you tomorrow.